Jesus bled, died for me. I see his wounds, his hands, his feet. My Savior on the cursed tree. His body bound, drenched in tears, they laid him down in Joseph's tomb. The entrance sealed by heavy stone. Messiah still, no Lord. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord our God. On the fair break of dawn, Son of Heaven rose again. Oh, tremble death, praise your sting. The angels roar, Christ the King. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord our He shall return in robes of white, and blazing sun shall pierce the night, and I will rise among the saints, my gaze transfixed on Jesus' face. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord our God. Oh, praise the nothing can separate. Nothing can separate. Even if I ran away, your love never fails. Though I still make mistakes, having mercies for me every day, your love never fails. Stay the same through the ages. Your love never changes. The day of the night, joy comes in the morning. Then when the oceans rage, I don't have to be afraid, because I know that you love me. Your love never fails. Wind is strong and the water's deep. Not alone here in these open seas. Your love never fails. The chasm is far too wide. Never thought I'd reach the other side. Your love never fails. You stay the same through the ages. Your love never changes. You're ready late in the night. Joy comes in the morning. And when the oceans rage, I don't have to be afraid, because I know that you love me. Your love never fails. So you stay the same. You stay the same through the ages. Your love never changes. Everything in the night, joy comes in the morning. And when the oceans rage, I don't have to be afraid, because I know that you love me. Your love never fails.
You can be seated.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to OneLife Community Church. I'm just going to tell you right now, even if this mic is working, I cannot tell. I have double ear infections, and so it sounds like I'm talking to you with hands over my ears, which I don't. So it's really weird to be up here. It's good to see you all. Hopefully, as you arrived, you received a bulletin. It looks like this, which is very different if you were here last week. We're doing some new things around here. We're very excited that you're here to join us. But I also want to point out, along with your bulletin, you should have received something called a connection card. And that is something we like to have everybody fill out. It's a way to connect with you, to hear from you. If you have questions about our church, if you're interested in getting involved in any way, if you have prayer requests, that's the tool we would like you all to use. And if you take a moment to fill that, that'd be great. If you're new here, first off, welcome and thank you. Also know that we will not give your information out to anyone. However, we will donate $5 in your name to Living Water International as a way of saying thank you and providing some clean water to those in need. So if you would all take a moment to fill that out, that would be fantastic. I have a couple announcements I want to hit that are in your bulletin. What I want to highlight, as the fall kicks in, our Kids Life program is looking for volunteers to help start the year strong and have lots of people involved in caring for our kids. We have new policy and procedures in place where we require 2 adults in every classroom. And so we're still in need of some volunteers, particularly 6 to 8 volunteers if it's just once a month, or 3 to 4 if you are interested in doing twice a month. Our Kids Life co-directors make it really easy to be involved. Our kids are amazing, and we're looking for anyone. You don't have to be a parent to be involved. So if you are interested in that, please let us know. You can fill that out on the connection card and let us know, or talk to any of the Kids Life co-directors, Aaron and Crystal, and they would love to connect you. There will also be a sign-up table after the service. You could go check out all the available options. With that as well, if you are a current volunteer or planning on being a volunteer, it's important to note in your bulletin there's 2 Kids Life fall training times that are planned for September 23rd or the 30th. Both of which will be downstairs in the lower fireside room from 11:45 to 12:45. Both have lunch and childcare provided. You only need to go to one of those trainings. So if you're involved in any form or fashion with Kids Life or planning on getting involved, make sure you mark that down on your calendar so you can attend. Third thing is, today we are launching a new sermon series called Change. With it, we're going to be looking at the hows and whys of change, how God initiates change, how to be open to it, the transitions that come along, and what do we do after we've moved through that. And with that, we're really excited. We're also trying some new things here. You may not have noticed, but we have new art all around the sanctuary here, all these beautiful paintings I highly recommend you checking out. We also have our new bulletin, and we're doing something different with our after-the-service hospitality time, which is we're going to have it up here. And so as you leave today, there'll be a bunch of refreshments to enjoy in here in the upper landing. And if you have kids and you need to go down and get them, there'll be places for you down there as well. We are also excited about how these changes are connected to our vision, how they're connected to some of our new policies and procedures, our new budget, but they're also shaped around suggestions you guys have been giving us. And so with that, I want you to know, as we try these things out, we're going to be learning in the process. We'd love to hear from you, your thoughts, or if you have other ideas, we'd love to hear about that as well. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for letting us know your thoughts. We are so glad you're here. The last thing I want to make sure you know is that one of the things we had happen a few weeks ago when we had our all-church meeting, we invited people who have been members in our church for a very long period of time to pray over the church. And one of the things that came up was the sense of being family. And we love that, and we hope that you feel connected here and feel like family. But we also want you to know, like, the number one way for you to start feeling connected as a part of the family is being involved in core groups. And our fall core groups are going to start having sign-ups starting next week. These are small groups of people, families, kids, sometimes just the guys, sometimes just the gals, you name it, various times, various locations, various content throughout the week. And we would really love it if everyone is involved, because it is the best way to feel known, to feel cared for and supported, to enjoy a meal together. And so we just want you to know about that, whether you've been here for 40 years or the last 20 minutes. we'd encourage you to get plugged in. Next week, we'll start having sign-ups with all the details and all the options available. If you have questions about it, you can note it on your connection card, or you could talk to Greg DiLoretto, the other co-lead. He'll be up here in a few minutes. You can't miss him. He's got an incredible red beard. So look for that. He'll be able to get you answers. At this time, what I'd like to do, if you have kids, make sure you look on the back of your bulletin so you know the sign-in and sign-out procedures for your kids, where they need to go, and make sure you get them there. At this time, if you could stand, greet the people around you. If you need coffee, by all means, get that. Kids, you are dismissed to Kids Life, and when you hear the band kick back in, come join us as we'll continue in the rest of our service.
We're going to continue in worship, so if you could make your way back to your seats, that'd be great. I know you. You're the God who calms all my storm. You're the voice inside my head. Don't give up. Don't let go. Don't lose trust. Don't lose hope. You can have all my fears, God. You can have all my sin. You can have all my weakness. I know you're with me to the very end. You can have all my fears, God. You can have all my sin. You can have all my weaknesses. Know you're with me to the very end. Know you're with me to the very end. Don't give up. Don't let go. Don't lose trust. Don't lose hope.
Well, again, good morning and welcome to One Life Community Church. My name is Greg. I'm one of the co-lead pastors here, and it is a delight to have. Whoa! It is a delight to be here and to be with you and to hear loudly. So welcome to all the people who are watching on live stream and anyone who's going to catch us later on our podcast. We're super excited that we're finding different ways to connect and engage with God. As Rich mentioned, there are some things different happening, and part of that is that we are in this season, this new sermon series we're doing called Change, where we're going to be exploring lots of different changes both here, but in our own lives. We're going to be looking at who we are, the question to change or not to change, looking at different stages of change. We're going to look at how change is kind of what we're calling a character crucible, that God uses those moments of change to shape and form us. We're going to talk about how do you change when you feel like you're stuck, like there's no way you can change or get out of that, even if you wanted to. And then after a change happens, how do you stay open to change and keep from getting into those stuck patterns? But before we do any of that, I want to pray, and then we'll keep going. So please join me as I pray. God, I give you great thanks for your presence here with us, for this day that we get to have to be together, spend some time with some amazing people and with you. I pray you would be here this morning and tune our hearts, that whether we're here for one day or we're here and we're going to stay, or whether we're, whatever stage we're in, you have brought this group together today to hear this as a gathered people. There's something you want to do as we are all here. So I pray you would tune our hearts and minds, that we would hear collectively what it is you would speak to us. Holy Spirit, move in us and help that to happen. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, today we're going to be talking about who we are. And it's a question that I think a lot of people are trying to figure out. One of my favorite people is this pretty famous martial artist named Bruce Lee, and he has this quote that says, "In order to control myself, I must first accept myself by going with my nature, not against it." And there's a lot of things in there we could argue about and all kinds of stuff, but I think it's reflective of an attempt for people to know who they are. right? That in order to go with your nature, you have to discover your nature. You have to investigate who you are. And I think before we even talk about change and what it takes to change and all that stuff, I think we have to know who we are to the best of our ability. I think it makes navigating change a lot easier and all the processes that go along with it. The problem is that knowing ourselves is not easy. It's super messy, and it takes a lot of time, and we have to be really honest with ourselves. But when we look at other areas of our life, we're fine with some of the processes it takes to know ourselves. If we feel like we need to go see a doctor, we want them to observe what's going on, diagnose it, make a decision, give us some actions to do, and keep working through that process. Or if we have something wrong with our vehicle, we take it to a mechanic, same process. And so what we're asking ourselves to do is to be able to look at our lives and be observers and participants in our own lives. In a little bit, I'm going to talk about why I think we're not very good at that. But I think in order for all this to happen, change, again, we have to know who we are, and I'm going to add in there, we have to know who God is. Now, in order to sort of discover this process and see maybe what it looks like, some of you aren't going to be excited to hear this. We're going to be covering 22 chapters of Scripture today. So pull out your Bibles. No, you will need your Bibles at some point, or else you can follow along on the screen. I'm going to be walking us through the life of this person in Scripture named Jacob. And there's a ton in this story that we can glean about change. But what we're going to do is we're going to kind of walk through the story, make some observations as we go, and then at the end, we'll sort of pull out a couple principles from the whole thing and see where we get. And it's in Genesis 28 through 50. So at some time you should go and read that. It's fascinating. But this guy Jacob is really an interesting guy. He actually is a descendant of this guy named Abraham, and lots of people refer to Abraham as Father Abraham. And Abraham was this guy who God made this covenant with, this promise where he said, I'm going to bless you, and your descendants are going to be more numerous than the stars in the sky and more numerous than the grains of sand on the shore, and you will be a blessing to all people through your descendants. And so Abraham has a son named Isaac, and Isaac meets Rebekah, and they get married, and they start having kids, and there's this prophecy that happens that says, there's 2 nations in you. When she gets pregnant, she's having some trouble. She's like, oh, what's going on? And someone prophesies and said, well, it's because you got 2 babies in you, and you have 2 nations in you, and the older is going to serve the younger. Now, if you're an older sibling like me, that's impossible, right? There's no way that ever could work. And so this story is already, no. As an older sibling, it's a little disheartening to hear that, though. So, 2 kids. The first one born is this guy named Esau. And the word Esau, his name, actually means hairy, right? Hairy, like this kind of hair. The root of that is this word asa, and it means to make or to fashion or to work. And all of those things actually describe Esau. He's known as a person who's active, doing things. He's out hunting. He's all that kind of stuff. And he's also very hairy. Jacob is the second one born. And as Esau is born, it says that Jacob is like reaching and grabbing for his heel. And that's why he is named Jacob, because that name means heel grabber. And it also means supplanter, like superseding or to replace. Now, as we keep going, one of the things we discover in this family is that there are some favorites. There's some favoritism that happens. It says that Isaac has the taste for venison in his mouth, right? And it's this image of him just loving to eat like venison and have that taste. And so because Esau is a skilled hunter, we're told that Isaac loved Esau. Jacob, on the other hand, is what they say about Jacob in the scriptures, that he stayed home. And we read that Rebekah, his mother, loved Jacob. Already in this story, when you read through it, we're getting all these insider moments, seeing moments of favoritism. What went into people naming their kids? We're in on a lot of the details, and it's actually going to increase as we go. So I want you to pay attention to some of those. In Genesis 25, 28 through 34, there's this pretty famous story where Esau is out hunting. He's been out all day, and he comes home. He's really, really hungry, and Jacob has made some delicious stew, and Esau comes running in and says, "Let me have some of that stew." And Jacob says, "Well," and this is pretty typical younger brother behavior. I'm just kidding. He says, "Yeah, why don't you give me that birthright of yours?" And Esau's like, "Well, whatever, what's a birthright to me?" And he's like, "Well, no, actually, you got to give it to me. You can't just say that. I really want you to say, kind of sign on the dotted line." And so Esau says, "Fine, take my birthright. I want the stew." So Esau gives his birthright, sells his birthright to his younger brother Jacob. We also read that Esau marries these two women, Judith and Basemath, and they're Hittite women in the area, and these are from a people group that the Israelites didn't particularly care for, and so this was this kind of move that caused Isaac and Rebekah a lot of grief. So again, we're getting these little details and sort of seeing these family things. Like many of us might understand, we're like, "Oh yeah, I had a sibling who married someone my parents didn't really care for," these kinds of things. And this is all very present in this story. And then there's this moment where Isaac begins thinking about his future. What's going to happen? And how is that, what is my legacy going to be? And how do I want to pass on what I have to my descendants? And so he wants to bless Esau. And so he says, "Esau, go and hunt like you do and get some amazing game. Bring it back. Cook it just like I like it. And then I'll give you my blessing." He says, "Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like and bring it to me to eat so that I may give you my blessing before I die." So Esau heads out. Rebekah, Jacob and Esau's mom, Isaac's wife, heard this and was like, "That's no good." And there's this prophecy that the younger is supposed to, rule over the older. And so I got to kind of work some angles here. And I don't know if that's familiar to you. Maybe you have been on the end of that where you're trying to work some angles on what God is trying to do. But she tells Jacob, "Go and get some goats, and I'll cook them up just the way Isaac likes them. And then you'll take it to him, and you'll get the blessing." Well, and Jacob says, "Well, it's going to be kind of tough because I don't really look or smell or act like Esau." And so they come up with this plan, and this will tell you how hairy Esau was. They put goat skins on his arms, and they're hoping that the smell of the food and the feel of the goat skin, because Isaac can't see very well, is going to be convincing. And so Jacob comes into Isaac's presence and says, "My father." And he says, "Yes, my son." He says, "Who is it?" And Jacob says, "I'm Esau, your firstborn." And there's this discussion that's kind of going on. And Isaac says, "Well, sounds like Jacob, but the food smells like something Esau would cook. So come over here." And he puts his hands on the goat skin, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, no, that feels like Esau." Okay. But he's still not sure, and so he asks again. He says, "Are you really my son Esau?" "I am," Jacob says. And so Isaac blesses Jacob. And it says that he embraces Jacob. And there's this developing idea here that you have a son who is the not favorite of his father, wanting or maybe a relationship, wanting to be at least equal, and now receiving this thing that might look like and even feel like what he wants, but it's not, because he knows it's not for him. Even though it's got all the trappings of "I'm giving you the blessing" and his intimacy with his father, it's not, because he knows it's for Esau. So Jacob leaves, and then Esau shows up, which is going to be problematic. Because Esau shows up, and he says, my father, please sit up and eat some of the game that I got so you can give me your blessing. Isaac's question again, who are you? I am your son, your firstborn. And now it's all out. Jacob says, your brother already came and took your blessing. He's deceitful. He's a thief, a usurper. And Esau chimes in, yes, isn't he rightly named Jacob? This is the second time he's taken advantage of me. He says, he took my birthright and now my blessing. And Esau holds a grudge against Jacob. And he says, after my father dies, I'm going to kill Jacob. Now, there's a side note I want to make here. Esau asks a heartbreaking question to his father. He says, do you only have one blessing? And I don't know if as a parent, if you've ever had a moment where your kids are asking for more than you have to give. But there is a reality as parents that there's only so much we can do. Yeah, it just was interesting to me. That kind of jumped out at me. So just you can chew on that however you want to. So Jacob hears that Esau is gonna kill him after his father dies, after their father dies, and so Rebekah, his mom says, "Go stay with my brother Laban, this guy, and you'll be safe there." And Rebekah then says to Isaac, "You know what? I don't want our son, Jacob, to marry any Hittite women," basically saying, I don't want him to be like Esau, which again, you see all this kind of positioning and favoritism. I don't want him to be like Esau. And so in that, Jacob says, okay, look, or Isaac says to Jacob, look, why don't you go stay with your uncle? Right, so it's the same thing that Rebekah was saying, but for a different reason. He says, because then you can find a wife there and it'll be good. And so he's going away, but one of the things that happens is that Isaac tells Jacob, he says, yeah, I'm sending you away for this reason, but he says, why don't you go be a community, go be blessed over there, and there's no sense of him ever coming back. And so again, we have Isaac and Jacob just exploring and living out this distance that's between them, where the whole time, I believe, what Jacob is longing for is intimacy. Okay, and we're seeing how lie begets lie and more covering up. You've got, Jacob's mom saying, look, you got to go because your brother's going to kill you. But then she talks to the dad and says, well, I don't want him to marry this. And it's all this manipulation. Okay, so now we have Jacob at Uncle Laban's house, right? He gets there. Before he gets there, though, he, on the way, stops and has this dream in Genesis 26. And he's laying on the ground, puts his head on a stone, and he has this vision as he's sleeping. And there's this ladder or stairway coming down out of heaven, and God sits at the top of it, and these angels are coming up and down it. And this is what God says to Jacob. He says, I am the Lord, the God of your father, Abraham, and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out north, south, east, and west. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. This is God saying who he is. He goes on, I am with you, and I will watch over you wherever you will go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. This is almost the exact opposite of what Isaac just said to him. Both of them said, yeah, you got to go on this journey. But God says, I'm with you. Where Isaac said, you need to go over there. God says, I'm going to bring you back. Isaac said, and you go over there and be a community over there. God says, I'm not going to leave you. Okay, and then this is Jacob's response. He says, if God will be with me, watch over me on this journey, give me food and clothes to wear, so that I can return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God. And so we have Jacob saying, okay, if you're going to do this, you're going to provide all this stuff, take care of me, yep, I'm in. You will be my God. Because we see what Jacob wants is to be home. He wants to be reconciled. He wants life at home with his family. Okay, so now he continues on his way. He gets to Uncle Laban's place. He meets some of Laban's workers. He says, hey, do you know Laban? They say, oh, yeah, we know Laban. And but, you know, we're out here working the field and stuff. And in that moment, Jacob sees Rachel, Laban's youngest daughter. It's weird when you read it, but it's customary because it says he weeps and then kisses her. Right? I'm just going to give you a little dating advice. You got to wait. You got to wait before the weeping and the kissing happens. Not on first sight. That's usually a sure way to not make that happen. So, anyways, so Jacob falls in love with Rachel, and he's talking to Laban, and Laban's like, man, you've been working for me now. So he starts working and helping Laban out, and he says, but you're family. I can't let you work for free. Name your wages. And Jacob says, okay, your youngest daughter. How's that? I'd love to be able to marry your youngest daughter. And Laban says, how about you work for me for 7 years, and then that'll be good. We'll call that a good arrangement. And so Jacob does. Works for 7 years for Laban. Now, I love my father-in-law. I know lots of you have father-in-laws that you care for, guys that you care for. But working with my father-in-law for 7 years would be challenging. Jacob does it, and it says 7 years felt like a few days because of his love. His great love for Rachel. That's awesome. It's so romantic and very cool. But when it comes for the deal to be done, the marriage night, Jacob goes into the marriage tent. There's Rachel, and they consummate the marriage and do all the things that married couples are supposed to do in the first night in ancient history, and gets up in the morning and goes, uh-oh, you're not Rachel. And it's Rachel's older sister, Leah. Jacob would like to have a conversation with Laban. So he goes to Laban, and Laban says, oh, yeah, I probably forgot to mention that we have this custom here where the older sisters got to get married first, just kind of how we do things. And so if you want to work for me for another 7 years, I suppose we could work that. And so Jacob says, okay, awesome, because of his great, great love for Rachel. But now he's also married to Leah. And so one of the things that happens is that Jacob loves Rachel, but does not love Leah. But they're married. And so there's some tensions that start to arise and some more just kind of chaotic drama and rivalries. God, though, sees that Leah is not loved and so allows her to have kids, but Rachel is not able to have kids. And so Leah has 4 kids, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, with Jacob, and Rachel has none. Rachel gets jealous of Leah. Even though she has the love of Jacob, she does not have the ability to have his children. And so she gets her servant, Bilhah, and says, Jacob, you sleep with my servant, and then I can get children through her. And so Bilhah has 2 kids with Jacob, Dan and Naphtali. And Naphtali, it's interesting, when he's named, what Rachel says is, this is awesome. I'm going to name you Naphtali because I have struggled with my sister, and I have won. You sense the craziness that's happening here? I'm going to claim victory over you by having a child through my servant because of this struggle we have. That is manipulating and using people to such a high degree. I'm going to bring a child into the world for my own victory. Well, Leah says, okay, she's not having any more kids right now, so she goes and gets her servant Zilpah and says, Jacob, you sleep with my servant, and you're going to have kids, and I'll have kids. And so Zilpah has 2 kids with Jacob, Gad and Asher. Leah then, again, is able to have kids, and so she has 3 more, Issachar, Zebulun, and Dinah, a girl. And in the midst of all this, it says that God remembers Rachel. And so Rachel is finally able to have a child, and she has a son named Joseph. And Joseph is very special to Jacob. And we're going to find out more about that. So Jacob then now got his family. He's got a large family, and he's thinking about leaving, and he's trying to figure out how that's all going to work. But in the meantime, to get it going, he's trying to figure out, I got to have some wealth to take with me. I've got some good wealth, but I want to get more. And so he engages in one of the first genetics experiments in the history of the world. And we're going to find out God gave him this idea, but he manufactures some ways to get certain animals in the flocks to have spots and stripes. And he makes this deal with Laban. He's like, hey, I tell you what, how about I take all the ones with spots and stripes? And Laban, thinking he was going to trick Jacob, said, sure, that's great. And then Laban went out and tried to remove all the ones that had spots and stripes, so there wouldn't be any for Jacob. Jacob, though, sets up this trick where he does some stuff with some reeds and water, and the animals drink, and then they show up with spots and stripes. And then Laban's really mad, and we have this sort of swindle war going on between Laban and Jacob. One of my favorite authors, Paul Stevens, says that the challenge for Jacob is he going to be out-Jacobed? Like, is he encountering himself in this? And so Laban then, Jacob kind of comes out the winner of this, and God says, okay, Jacob, time to go. I'm going to be with you. You should go. Okay? So that he's gathering his whole family, says, get all your stuff, we're going to leave. He's doing it kind of secretly, kind of sneaky, which is not unusual for him. His wife Rachel, though, took all of her dad, Laban, stole all of his idols, all of his gods, and is going to bring those with her. Laban chases after him. He's trying to search through the stuff, saying, look, Jacob, how could you do this to me? You leave, you take my kids and my grandkids, and I don't even get to say goodbye, and then my idols are missing. And Jacob says, you can search through the stuff, and whoever has those idols, they should die. Rachel says she's sitting on them. She's got them in a pile, and she's sitting on them. And as her dad comes around and is looking, she says, forgive me, I can't stand up. I'm having my period. So she's unclean, according to Jewish custom. So Laban doesn't find the idols, and he's like, oh, man, okay, I guess I was wrong. And he kind of has this change of heart. And then he and Jacob decide, they do this thing called mitzvah. And I don't know if any of you remember this. I don't know if they have them anymore, but there used to be these necklaces people would wear. It was like a coin broken in half. And it would say mitzvah, and it was basically, may God bless you. And the idea was 2 people, who were good friends or a couple or something, they'd take one half and the other would have the other half. And it was a way to remember each other. May God bless you as we're apart. But that's not what the intent of this setup was. This was the 2 of these guys creating boundaries so that they would never cross paths unless they were intending to do good. And so what they said was, you go that way, I'll go this way, and this spot right here, we are never going to cross it unless we're intending good for the other. And so it was a way to keep them apart. May God bless us as we stay apart, and only to come together to do good. So Jacob leaves. He's heading back home. He's worried about meeting Esau, so he sends a messenger ahead. The messenger comes back and says, oh, yeah, your brother's super excited to see you. In fact, he's coming with 400 men. Jacob is terrified. He divides up the group. Okay, you guys go and you guys go, hoping that some of them are going to escape, and in the process reminds God of his promises. Remember, you said you were going to do this. And then he continues sending gifts forward to try to pacify Esau. The night before he's going to meet with Esau, he stays in the spot alone. And he has this wrestling match with what is called the God-man. Because it says this man shows up and wrestles with Jacob. Wrestles with him all night. And no one's winning. There's no victor. And so the God-man, this unidentified man, touches Jacob's hip and sort of blows his hip out of joint. But Jacob will not let go because he's the heel grabber. And God, the God-man says, let me go, it's daybreak. And Jacob says, no, I'm not going to let you go unless you bless me. And God says, what is your name? And for the first time, Jacob uses his own name for himself. Earlier, he used Esau's name. Now he says, my name is Jacob. I'm the heel grabber. I'm the usurper. I'm in this mess. You've had me pinned down all night. We're at a stalemate. No one's winning. You took my hip out of socket. But I am not letting go of you until you bless me. And God says, your name is not Jacob any longer. You're going to be Israel because you've wrestled with God and with humans and have overcome. So God blesses Jacob with a new name, Israel, which as you go through the rest of Jacob's story, it's fascinating. It's interchangeable. Sometimes it's Israel, sometimes it's Jacob, sometimes people using it, sometimes God using it. Jacob, Israel, the next morning he goes ahead, has his family behind him to meet Esau. And he meets Esau and he bows down to him several times. And it says, but Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him, threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And Esau's like, what's with all these herds and flocks? Jacob's like, they're for you. I want to find favor with you. And Esau's like, I got a ton. Keep them. Jacob's like, no, please accept it. And it says Esau finally accepts because Jacob insists. It's this great reunion between these brothers. Right? It's very still Esau in character, or the same Esau that would give up his birthright for some stew and I'm going to kill my brother, and at the same time can easily let those things go. It seems like as easy as they can rise up, he can let those go. So the brothers unite. Jacob is in home. There's this crazy story, very sadly, Jacob's daughter is raped by the son of a local ruler, who then tries to get her for his wife, this guy's father tries to convince Jacob, hey, this is a good idea. Our two groups can unite through this marriage. And the people of the city say, look, you can make the bride price whatever you like. Just give the young woman to us. The man says, give her to me as my wife. And there's this unique military strategy that they use where they trick, which is not at all uncommon for Jacob and his crew. They trick the men there and they say, well, we can't do that until you're all circumcised. And they go, oh, that sounds like a great idea. We'll do that. And so they do that. And then 3 days in, when they're all still in pain and not recovered, two of Dinah's brothers come in and slaughter them all and take all their stuff. And Jacob says, okay, you should have thought this through. You've brought trouble on me by making me obnoxious to the people of this land. The brothers say, they should have thought it through before they treated our sister like a prostitute. There's something in this family that's starting to rise up. God says to Jacob, go to Bethel, and in the process, though, you got to get rid of any foreign idols you have with you. Remember, Rachel had all those. We're not told that she still has them. We're not told that in this moment she gets rid of them. But Paul Stevens notes that it's significant that right after this decision is made to go to Bethel, but to get rid of those first, the very next thing that happens is that Rachel dies. And he wonders if Jacob is racked, if Israel is racked with guilt because he knows that he willed it to happen. We read on that Israel, Jacob, his son Joseph, says he loves Joseph more than any of his other sons. And you want to scream out, come on, are you serious? Didn't we already do this before? Didn't we already see what happens when you play favorites with your kids? So his brothers plot to kill him, plot to kill Joseph. They leave Joseph in a cistern to die, and said, Judah is like, we can't leave him in a cistern, so we'll sell him into slavery. There's lies and more lies happening. Joseph ends up in Egypt, like many of us know. He moves his way up from prison to second in command under Pharaoh. He has this vision about a famine, sets up all these storehouses, puts Egypt in a great place so that all the world is coming to them for food, including Joseph's brothers. Genesis 42, it says, then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. It says, but Jacob did not send Benjamin, that's his youngest son, because he's afraid something might happen to him. So Israel's sons were among those who went to Egypt to buy grain. Joseph says, you're spies. You're here to figure out Egypt's weaknesses. And they say, no. And he says, well, to prove it, bring your youngest. He asked them in a conversation about, do you have any other brothers? Do you have a father? And they said, yeah, we had a younger brother. He said, you can prove to me that you're honest by sending your youngest brother with you next time. So they're trying to work this. They go back to Jacob. They tell him the story. Jacob says, no, I'm not sending Benjamin down with you. And Judah steps in and says, look, send the boy with me. I myself will guarantee his safety. Hold me responsible. I will bear the blame before you all my life if he doesn't return. And finally, in this whole story, someone's taking responsibility for their own actions. Just before this, Reuben said to his dad, look, take my 2 sons instead. Laban offered Leah. We have all these moments where people are offering up other people. Finally, Judah jumps in and says, no, I will do this. So they go. They're there. Joseph's he's kind of playing tricks on them, and he's not telling them who they are, but they're back again. They've got Benjamin. And he says, yep, okay, go home. And he sticks one of his silver cups. He has one of his servants put one of his silver cups in Benjamin's bag. And as they leave, he goes after him and says, hey, someone stole my silver cup. And whoever has done it needs to come and be a slave for me. They find it in Benjamin's bag. Judah says, look, if I go back without him, my dad will die. So take me instead. At this point, Joseph is like, I can't do this anymore. Here's who I am. Goes through the whole thing. Tells them all. They're all happy to be together, which there's a lot of stuff I know that happened in there that we don't know about, that I just don't know how everyone could be so happy right away. There's a lot of lies and stuff that have taken place. And so, again, in the process now, God speaks to Israel / Jacob, and he even says at this point, Jacob, Jacob. And Jacob says, what? He says, go, I'll be with you. You're going to be safe. You're going to be okay in Egypt. Go. So he goes, and he gets there. He sees Joseph. He meets Joseph's sons, and he blesses them. In fact, Joseph brings his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, to see him, and Jacob, and he says, I'm going to make them my own. I'm going to adopt them, and they're going to be like my own sons. When they're listed, they'll be listed as my sons. And he says, I'm going to bless them. And the right hand is the one you bless the oldest with, and it's the hand of like prominence and favor and all that stuff. But he crosses them over, and he puts the right hand on the younger, which is probably another younger brother trick. But Joseph's like, no, you can't do that. That's not the right way. And Jacob just goes, I know, but I'm doing this. This is my way of doing this. And then he dies. The story is huge. So much going on. The whole time, though, Jacob is in this process of discovering, even to the very end, who he is. It takes work. It takes time. We're in process. You got to stay with it through your whole life. You have to be observant. As I said earlier, but I don't think we do very well at this because we're not very good at participating in ways where we're observing our own lives. Most of the time, we're just tired passengers. We sleep and occasionally wake up in this rush and kind of go, where are we? and realize we don't know or don't have the energy to figure out and just kind of go back to sleep. The other day I was talking with a parent at my oldest daughter's school, and she said, "How are you doing juggling all the new schedules, and girls have dance, and both my daughters dance a lot, and they go to different schools now?" And I said, on Google Calendar, everything that's in the past is a faded color, and everything that's now or in the future is a bright color. So I just look at the first column that's bright colored, and I just do what it tells me. I don't even know what day it is. I just, bright column, that's today, do the stuff it tells me, go to this school, drop someone off, look around if there's anyone else in my family, pick them up, take them to wherever they're supposed to go. I don't even know what day it is. How, when we're in that kind of phrase, in that kind of space, how do we know ourselves? I think we see from the story of Jacob, we have to engage with God. I think the problem for us is we think that this is the primary place where we do that. Listen to the places where God is in Jacob's life: birth, the naming of kids, eating, family, sleeping, dreaming, courting, dating, marriage, work, sex, home, calling, parenting, finishing, and death. Those are the places where Jacob encounters God and figures out who he is. Church is where we gather to worship in a way that teaches and empowers us to see, find, and engage with God when we're not here, which is actually most of the time. It's to help us go out and live the life of a follower of Jesus outside of this building. So that brings me to ask this question. There's who we are as an individual. There's all those spaces we can look in every moment of our life. We have to be careful observers. That's true. But who are we as a church? OneLife Community Church. Who are we? We're an Assemblies of God church. We're approximately 40 years old. We have strong campus connections. 3/4 of our time as a church we spent renting a building, and we have a strong missions emphasis. These things have always been true and always been at the heart of who we are. But what about now? How are we growing? How are we changing? Because I know the stories I heard, which I heard stories before I ever started coming here about Calvary Chapel, because I was involved in the campus ministry up at Western, and they have a really strong relationship with the church up there. And so it was a commonality that was shared, that there was a strong church down here that was supporting the campus ministry at UW, much like there was up at Western. So I heard stories about this church. And then when I started coming here about 20 years ago, almost to the week, 20 years ago, and the stories I heard that this church is different. This church tries new things. This church is creative. They're faithful to Jesus in the Spirit, not the culture or tradition. So I'm wondering if we're in that space. As we start to investigate some changes with things like moving the food upstairs instead of downstairs. Right? How are we going to walk with that? How are we going to embrace those changes? And how are we going to embrace other changes that God is inviting us into? Because we've grown. We have a thriving tutoring ministry, right? That has been going for 6 years now? Come on, 7. 7 years, and it's growing. We have dinner church, right, that is thriving and growing, right? And there's probably all kinds of other things. Okay, but where are we at? And as we bring some of these changes, those are the questions we're asking, and asking you to help us explore. I have a couple questions I want us to ponder that you can write. You can take a picture of these. You can write them down. The worship team, I'd like to invite them up. As soon as I'm finished asking these questions, though, Jessica has a song. If that's still okay. So the questions are, and the way we'll do this is Jessica will sing the song, and you can listen. The worship team will play for a moment. You can write down some answers on the connection cards, and if you want to put those in the wood boxes, you can. And it's a great way for us to just have feedback. So, but the questions are, what change or changes are you currently experiencing? Could be anything. Could be a new schedule, could be a new job, could be a new relationship, could be relationships have gone away, jobs gone away, whatever. What change or changes are you experiencing? Second, how is that going? This could be really easy, good, bad, something in between. And then thirdly, this might take a little bit more time, who are you and who are you becoming as you navigate those changes? And I'm going to ask you to, you can either write this for yourself or for the church, right? You could do both if you want to. But Jessica is going to sing, and that's going to be our closing prayer. And then the worship team will pray for a second. It'll give you time to write some stuff down, and then we'll close our time with a song.
Brothers and sisters, come as you are. Sisters and brothers, come as you are. Broken, weary, tired, alone. Joyful, peaceful, never alone. Come as you are. Come as you are. Let me be your center. Let me be your center. Bring all your things and lay them down at the center with me.
Would you stand as we sing?
Thousand times I failed, still your mercy remains. Should I stumble again, still I'm caught in your grace. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all fame. Thousand times I failed, still your mercy remains.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for worshiping with us. Thank you for being this church, this family, this community that is One Life. As you go, if you could drop connection cards in the wooden boxes on your way out, head out into the lobby. There are light refreshments and stuff out there. And parents, feel free to grab some stuff and then head downstairs to grab your kids. There are some space set up down there for them to play and you to hang out down there too. And yeah, as you go, may you have courage. May you have a vibrant imagination. May you have ears to hear and eyes to see what God is inviting you to do. May you step into joining in what God is doing. Go in peace.